The lanterns of Kyoto. Let your breathing slow. Just for a moment, let whatever you are carrying today become a little lighter. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest. Let the pace of things ease down, the way a river eases when it reaches a wide and quiet place. You are going somewhere gentle tonight. Part 1. The Street That Smells of Rain. His name was Callum. He was a writer, which meant he was, professionally, a person who noticed things, the quality of light through a particular window, the way strangers held their coffee cups, the exact sound a door made when it was opened by someone in a hurry versus someone who wasn't. He had been trained, or had trained himself, to pay attention. And yet, for the past several months, he had noticed almost nothing. This happened to writers sometimes. To people, more broadly. The noticing faculty, that quiet, receptive part of the self that stands at the window of the world and takes it all in, grows tired, or shy, or simply overwhelmed by everything it has been asked to process. It goes somewhere small and dark and waits. And the person walks around feeling strangely hollow, as though the world is happening just slightly beyond the reach of their fingertips. Callum had come to Kyoto because he didn't know what else to do. He had told his editor he needed more time. He had told his friends he needed some air. What he hadn't told anyone, what he had barely admitted to himself, was that he had come here because he was hoping the city might remind him how to feel something again. He wasn't sure that was a reasonable thing to ask of a city. But he had asked it anyway. The rain had started that afternoon, just after 4. Not a dramatic rain. Not the kind that announces itself with thunder and sends people running. This was the other kind, the kind that arrives quietly, almost apologetically, as though it hadn't wanted to interrupt but had something important to say. It fell in a fine, silver curtain over the rooftops of Higashiyama, and the stones of the old streets darkened slowly and began to shine, and the air changed entirely. This is what rain does to Kyoto. It doesn't obscure the city, it reveals it. The color of the old roof tiles deepens. The moss on the temple walls becomes an almost impossible green. The lanterns that hang along the narrow streets, which during the day are just lanterns, become in the rain something warmer, something that seems to generate not just light but a particular quality of comfort, the feeling of being sheltered, of being inside something, even when you are standing in the open air. Callum had gone out into it without a plan. He had his notebook in his jacket pocket, a reflex more than an intention. He was not, he told himself, going out to write. He was going out to walk. To be in the rain. To let the city do whatever it was going to do. He had turned left out of his inn and walked without deciding where he was going, and the streets had received him the way old streets do, without comment, without direction, simply opening themselves one after another as he moved through them. Higashiyama at dusk in the rain is not quite like anywhere else on earth. The streets here are narrow and stone-paved, lined with wooden buildings that lean toward each other overhead as though sharing a confidence. In summer, the trees that grow between the buildings are full and heavy, and when rain falls through them it makes a particular sound. Not the flat sound of rain on pavement, but a layered, textured sound, rain on leaves and then rain through leaves and then rain on stone, 3 sounds in one, a small and intricate percussion. The tourists who had crowded these streets during the day had retreated. The souvenir shops were closing, their owners pulling wooden shutters across their fronts with practiced ease, and the streets were returning to something older. Something that didn't need an audience. Callum walked slowly. He passed a shrine gate, vermilion and enormous against the gray sky, its base darkened with rain, its top disappearing into the cedar trees above. He paused beneath it for a moment, not from any particular religious feeling, but because it seemed like the kind of thing that deserved a pause. The kind of structure that had been standing while centuries passed around it, and had developed, through sheer persistence, a sort of gravity. He stood under it and looked at the rain falling through the trees. And something, small and tentative, like a bird landing on a branch, moved in him. Not quite feeling. Not yet. But the possibility of feeling. The faint warmth of something that might, given time and quiet, become something more. He walked on. The scent reached him before anything else. This is often how Kyoto announces itself, not visually, not through sound, but through the air. The city has layers of smell that shift as you move through its streets, stone and cedar and old wood, the green, grassy sweetness of fresh matcha from a nearby tea shop, the smoke of incense from a temple that you haven't seen yet but are somehow already inside the atmosphere of. What reached Callum now was something beneath all of those, something older. A combination of things he couldn't separate, rain on warm stone, and wood smoke, and something that might have been tea, and something else entirely that had no name he knew but that felt, inexplicably, like memory. Not his own memory. Something larger. The accumulated memory of a street that has been walked down by 10,000 people before him and holds, somewhere in its stones, the residue of all that passing. He stopped walking. He looked around. The street he was on was one he didn't recognize, which, in Higashiyama, was not unusual, the streets there being numerous and winding and not entirely committed to making themselves easy to navigate. It was narrower than the one he'd left, and darker, and the lanterns here were further apart, so that the light came in pools separated by longer stretches of warm shadow. The buildings on either side were old. Very old. Their wood was dark with age and rain, and the light from within them, where there was light, came through paper screens and was the color of warm honey. And at the far end of the street, set slightly back from the others, behind a small stone garden that the rain was filling with tiny ripples. A tea house. He almost walked past it. This is worth saying. He almost walked past it, the way we almost walk past most things, because we are looking at our feet, or at our phones, or at the middle distance where thoughts live. Because the world is always offering us things and we are often, for entirely understandable reasons, not quite looking in the right direction. But something made him look up. Perhaps it was the smell, stronger now, definitely tea, definitely incense, and something floral beneath it, like wisteria or plum, coming from somewhere inside or just behind the building. Perhaps it was the light, the paper screens of the tea house glowed a deeper amber than the buildings around it, as though whatever lamp burned inside was older or kinder or simply more generous than ordinary light. Or perhaps it was the sign. Small, wooden, hanging from a nail beside the door on a thin cord that swayed very slightly in the rain. Handwritten, brushed, really, in ink that had faded to a warm gray-brown, in Japanese characters he couldn't read. But below them, in smaller letters, in English that seemed almost an afterthought. Open when it rains. Callum stood in front of the tea house for a long moment. He was a rational person. He believed in cause and effect, in reasonable explanations, in the general reliability of the physical world to behave as the physical world was supposed to behave. He did not, as a rule, walk into unfamiliar establishments in foreign cities on the basis of handwritten signs. And yet, he looked at the sign. He looked at the door, old wood, dark with rain, a handle worn smooth by many hands. He looked at the amber light behind the paper screens, steady and warm and entirely undisturbed by the rain falling all around it. He thought about the hollow feeling he had been carrying. He thought about the scent of tea. He pushed the door open. The sound of the rain stopped. Not entirely, he could still hear it, distantly, on the roof and in the garden, but it became background. It became the world outside, and he was now somewhere that was not outside, and the distinction was immediate and complete. The room was small, low-ceilinged, with dark wooden beams above and tatami matting below, and the particular quality of warmth that comes not from a thermostat but from walls that have absorbed the heat of 1,000 evenings and offer it back quietly and without fanfare. There were 2 low tables. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, 3 of them, each a slightly different shade of amber, casting the room in overlapping circles of warm light. The smell was extraordinary. Tea, yes, green and grassy and deep, but layered over with something smoky, something sweet, something that seemed to have no single source but to rise from the room itself, from the wood and the paper and the years the place had been quietly accumulating. And behind the low counter at the far end of the room, arranging something with careful, unhurried hands. A woman. She looked up. She smiled. It was not a surprised smile. It was not a welcome, "How many in your party?" smile. It was the smile of someone who had been expecting you, not you specifically, perhaps, but someone like you. Someone who had come in from the rain and needed, without quite knowing it, exactly this. "Please," she said softly, gesturing to the nearer of the 2 tables. "Sit." And Callum, without quite deciding to, sat. Part 2, the woman who had lived many lives. She moved the way water moves. Not quickly, there was nothing quick about her, but with the particular fluid economy of someone who has done a thing so many times that the body no longer needs to think about it. Every gesture was complete. Every movement arrived exactly where it was going without detour or hesitation. She lifted a cloth, folded it, set it down. She filled a small iron kettle from a ceramic jug. She placed a bamboo ladle across the top of a wooden container with a sound so soft it was barely a sound at all. Callum watched her from his place at the low table, his legs folded beneath him in a position his body was only partially comfortable with, his notebook still in his jacket pocket and showing no signs of coming out. He was, he realized, simply watching. Not analyzing. Not composing sentences in his head about what he was seeing. Not reaching for the notebook to capture it before it disappeared. Just watching. Taking it in. Letting it be what it was without immediately needing to turn it into something else. He couldn't remember the last time he had done that. Her name, she told him, was Hannah. She offered it simply, the way you offer something you have no attachment to. "Here, take it, it's yours." She said it while she worked, without looking up, as though names were practical things and this one was simply the most efficient way to address her. "Hannah," Callum repeated. She glanced up briefly. "You say it well." "I'm not sure I do." "No," she agreed pleasantly. "But you tried carefully." "That is different from saying it well, but it is better in its own way." He wasn't sure how to respond to that. He found that he didn't need to. She had set a small iron tetsubin on a stand above a glowing bed of charcoal, the source, he now realized, of the faint smokiness that threaded through the room's other smells. The kettle was dark and heavy and irregular, its surface textured like something organic, like the skin of something ancient. It sat above the coals with absolute patience. The rain tapped the roof. The charcoal glowed. Callum felt something in his chest that he recognized, distantly, as peace, though it felt unfamiliar enough that he almost didn't trust it. He sat with it carefully, the way you sit with something fragile, not gripping it too hard. "You are a writer," Hannah said. It wasn't a question. Callum looked at her. She was measuring tea into a small ceramic bowl, her attention apparently entirely on what her hands were doing. "How did you?" "You came in from the rain," she said, "and the first thing you did was look at everything except the obvious things. You did not look at the menu. You did not look for a coat hook. You looked at the ceiling beams, and then the lanterns, and then the pattern of the tatami. People do that when they are storing things away. She set the ceramic bowl down and looked at him properly for the first time. She had a face that was difficult to age, not because it was particularly unlined, but because its character was so strong that age seemed beside the point. Her eyes were dark and clear and held the particular quality of someone who finds most things genuinely interesting. Or, she added, you are a spy. I'm a writer, Callum said. Yes, she said. I thought so. Spies look at the exits. He laughed. It surprised him, the laugh. It came from somewhere unguarded, somewhere that hadn't been reached in a while, and it was short and genuine and left him feeling slightly lighter, as though it had carried something out with it on the way. Hannah smiled, a small, satisfied smile, the smile of someone who has placed something exactly where they intended, and returned to her work. The kettle had begun to speak. Not a boil, not yet, but the first faint sound of water beginning to move, a distant, whispering hiss that rose and fell as the heat shifted through it. This, Callum thought, was one of the most quietly beautiful sounds in the world, water approaching the point of transformation. Not yet changed, but becoming. Are you finding what you came for? Hannah asked. In Kyoto? In Kyoto. In this street. In this room. She paused. In the rain. Callum considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I don't think I knew what I came for, he said. I think I came because I ran out of better ideas. Hannah nodded slowly, as though this were not only understandable but quite possibly optimal. This is often the best reason to go somewhere, she said. When you have a plan, you see the plan. When you have no plan, she lifted one hand briefly toward the room around them, toward the rain, toward the lanterns, toward everything. You see this. She brought the tea. Not immediately, there was a process, and the process was not hurried, and Callum found that he did not want it to be hurried. He watched each stage of it with the focused, undemanding attention of someone watching a flame, not trying to understand it, not trying to predict it, simply present to it. She warmed the bowl first, pouring a small amount of hot water into it and turning it between her palms before emptying it into a shallow dish. She measured the matcha with a bamboo scoop, bright, impossible green, the green of something very alive, and added water from the kettle, which was now just below its full boil, a temperature she judged, apparently, entirely by sound and by the thin curl of steam that rose from the spout. Then she whisked. The chasen, the bamboo whisk, moved through the tea in a motion that was both precise and somehow free, a controlled improvisation, and the sound of it was its own small music, a soft, rapid, feathery sound that filled the room briefly and then stilled as she lifted the whisk and the tea settled into a smooth, deep green surface, faintly frothy at the edges. She set the bowl in front of him with both hands. She stepped back. Please, she said. Callum looked at the bowl for a moment before he picked it up. He wasn't sure why. Something about it seemed to require looking at. The green of the tea was luminous in the lantern light, not a color you saw often in the world, not at this depth, not with this quality of aliveness. The ceramic of the bowl was rough and dark and irregular, and the tea inside it seemed to glow against it, as if lit from below. He picked it up with both hands, the way she had given it, which felt correct, though he couldn't have said why. He drank. The taste was extraordinary. Not just matcha, he had drunk matcha before, in cafes, in paper cups, but something underneath or beyond it. Something that had to do with the bowl and the room and the rain and the hour, with the journey from the inn through the wet streets, with Hannah and her precise, unhurried hands and the charcoal and the kettle that had sat above it so patiently. The taste had context. It tasted of where it had come from. He set the bowl down. He was quiet for a moment. "How long have you had this tea house?" he asked. Hannah sat across from him now, her own bowl between her hands, and she considered the question with what he was beginning to recognize as her characteristic thoughtfulness, never rushing an answer, never filling silence simply because it was there. "That is an interesting question," she said finally. "Because the tea house has been here longer than I have. I did not create it. I simply continue it." "How long has it been here?" She tilted her head slightly. "My grandmother's grandmother knew it. So, a long time. Long enough that the building remembers things that the people have forgotten." The rain shifted. It had been a fine, steady rain since Callum arrived, but now it deepened slightly, not a downpour, but fuller, more deliberate, as though the sky had decided to commit more fully to what it was doing. The sound on the roof became richer, layered, and somewhere in the garden outside he could hear water moving through a bamboo pipe and falling into a stone basin, a sound that was rhythmic and clean and entirely beautiful. "Only when it rains," Callum said, remembering the sign. "Why?" Hannah looked at him over the rim of her bowl. "My grandmother said it was because the tea house preferred the rain. That it was shy in dry weather, too many people, too much noise, too much wanting." She paused. "Rain slows people down. Rain makes them look at their feet and find, by accident, the streets they were not looking for." "Like me," Callum said. "Like you," she agreed. He asked her, then, carefully, not wanting to break something, about the lives she had lived. He wasn't sure why he asked it. Something about the way she had said "I simply continue it," the easy, unattached way she had said it, as though continuity was a simple thing, as though the passage of time was not loss but just movement, had made him curious about what lay behind the ease. "You say that as though you've seen a great deal," he said. She looked at him with that dark, clear gaze. "I have a daughter in Osaka," she said, "who works with computers and thinks I am eccentric for running this place. I have a scar on my left hand from a pottery class I took when I was 22, in which I was not talented but very enthusiastic. I lived for 3 years in Hokkaido, where the winters are very serious and teach you things that the rest of the year cannot." She paused. "I was married once. A good man. He died 8 years ago." Another pause, shorter. "And I have worked in this tea house since I was 19 years old, which means I have made tea for many, many people." She said it all with the same unhurried evenness, each fact carrying the same weight, given the same care, as though nothing in a life should be ranked above another thing, as though the scar from the pottery class and the death of her husband in the winter in Hokkaido were all simply part of the same fabric. "I'm sorry," Callum said. "About your husband." "Thank you," she said simply. "He loved the rain. He would have liked tonight very much." They sat with that for a moment. Outside, the rain fell through the garden. The bamboo pipe spoke its patient note. The lanterns hung in their warm amber and did not flicker. Callum thought about the hollow feeling again. He had been carrying it so long that he had stopped noticing its weight, the way you stop noticing a sound that has been there long enough. But here, in this room, with this tea and this woman in the rain doing its work on the roof and the garden, he could feel the edges of it differently. Not gone, but different. As if the room had gently taken it out of his hands and was holding it for a moment, just to give him a rest. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." "Do you ever—" He stopped. "Tried again." "I came here because I couldn't write. I've been unable to write for months and I don't know what I thought. That somewhere different would help. That if I changed the view, the inside of my head would change too." He looked at the tea. "Does that seem foolish?" Hannah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There is a word in Japanese, ma. It means, roughly, a pause. A gap. The silence between notes that makes the notes mean something. She turned her bowl slowly between her hands. Where a writer cannot write, perhaps this is not a failure. Perhaps this is the pause that the work requires before the next thing can come. The kettle breathed. The rain breathed. Callum looked at his hands. I hadn't thought of it that way, he said. Most people don't, said Hannah. We are not taught to value the gap. We are taught to fill it. He reached into his pocket. He took out the notebook. He didn't open it. He just set it on the table in front of him, between his bowl and the edge of the tatami, and looked at it. The worn cover. The bent corner of one page, visible at the top. The slight swelling of the spine that came from being carried in a pocket in the rain. He didn't open it. But he had taken it out. And that, he thought, was something. Hannah glanced at it and said nothing. She rose, quietly, to tend to the kettle. The rain played its long, soft note on the roof. Part 3. What the rain leaves behind. Let yourself settle a little deeper now. Whatever you are resting on, feel it beneath you. The weight of your body, held. The warmth of the air around you, close and kind. Let the sounds of the room you are in become distant, gentle, unimportant. Let them become like rain on a roof somewhere above you, present, but not demanding anything. You are still in the tea house. The lanterns are still burning. Hannah returned to the table with more water for the kettle and a small ceramic dish on which she had placed 2 pieces of wagashi, the soft, sweet confections that accompany formal tea. They were shaped like flowers, pale pink and white, and they sat on the dish with the quiet elegance of things that have been made with complete attention. She set them between the 2 bowls and sat back down without ceremony. You should eat, she said. Not because you are hungry. Because sweetness before tea changes what the tea tastes like. It prepares the mouth for something it would otherwise find too strong. Callum picked up one of the small sweets. It was softer than he expected, and the sweetness of it was delicate, not the aggressive sweetness of sugar but something more like the memory of sweetness, like fruit recalled rather than eaten. He let it dissolve slowly. Then he lifted his bowl. The tea was different now. Hannah was right, the sweetness had opened something in his mouth, or rather had cleared something, the way wiping a window clears it, and the tea came through with a depth that hadn't been there before. Grassy and warm and slightly bitter at the end, in a way that wasn't unpleasant but was honest. In a way that tasted, he thought, like something true. He set the bowl down. He looked at the notebook on the table. What do you write about? Hannah asked. People, Callum said. Mostly. The way they move through the world. The choices they make without knowing they're making them. He paused. I used to find it everywhere. Material, I mean. The world used to feel full of it. Overfull, sometimes. And now? He was quiet for a moment. It's like trying to tune into a frequency that has moved, he said slowly. I know the signal is still there. I can almost hear it. But I can't quite. He stopped. Hannah waited. I think I stopped trusting it, he said. And the words, once out, seemed more true than he had expected them to be. He sat with them for a moment, turning them over. I stopped trusting that what I noticed was worth anything. And once you stop trusting it, you stop noticing. And then you are just a person walking around, and the world is just a world, and none of it. He stopped again. Outside, the rain fell through the garden with perfect indifference to everything, which was somehow exactly what the moment needed. May I tell you something? Hannah said. Please. She turned her bowl in her hands, a slow, deliberate rotation, as though she were reading something in its surface. When I first began making tea, I was 19, very young, very serious. My teacher told me something that I did not understand for many years. She said, "The bowl does not know it is beautiful. The tea does not know it is good. They simply are what they are, completely, without any opinion about themselves." She set the bowl down. She said that our only work is to be what we are, completely, without opinion. To trust that what we notice is worth noticing, simply because we noticed it. Callum looked at her. "And if what we notice turns out not to be worth anything, then it teaches you what is," she said simply. "Either way, the noticing is not wasted." He picked up the notebook. He opened it. Not to a particular page, not with a particular intention, but the way you open a door you have been standing in front of for a long time, simply because at some point the standing becomes more effortful than the opening. The pages were mostly blank. There were notes from months ago, fragments, observations, a description of a train platform in Edinburgh, a sentence about the way his neighbor hung laundry in a specific wind. Ordinary things. Things he had noticed before the noticing had dried up. He looked at them. And then he picked up his pen, which had been in his pocket alongside the notebook, carried every day as a habit even through the months of not using it, and he wrote, on a clean page, in the middle of it, with the rain on the roof and the lanterns above him and the smell of tea and wood smoke and incense moving through the room like something breathing. "The tea house opens when it rains." He looked at it. It was not much. It was 7 words. But they were his words, and they had come from the evening, and the evening had come from the rain, and the rain had come from, wherever rain comes from, the vast and indifferent sky that gives without being asked and takes nothing back. Something moved in him. Not a flood. Not a sudden return of everything that had gone quiet. Something smaller and more tentative than that, the first movement of something underground, pushing toward the surface. The very beginning of something that was not yet light but was, unmistakably, the direction of light. He exhaled. He looked up at Hannah. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the garden, through the gap in the paper screen that she had left open when she came back from the kettle, and the rain outside was visible there, a dark shimmer, a moving darkness, the garden transformed by water into something that seemed less like a garden and more like a painting of one. "It's beautiful," he said. "Mono no aware," she said softly. "What does that mean?" She was quiet for a moment, as though gathering the right words from a language that did not have a perfect equivalent. "It means, the pathos of things. The bittersweet awareness that everything is passing. That the rain will stop. That the lanterns will go out. That the cherry blossoms fall, and it is because they fall that we love them." She paused. "It is not sadness, exactly. It is more like tenderness. Tenderness toward the world, because nothing in it stays." Callum sat with that. The rain continued its long conversation with the roof. The charcoal beneath the kettle had settled into a quieter glow, still warm, still present, but lower now, the evening deepening around it. One of the 3 lanterns above them had dimmed very slightly, its paper yellower than the others, its light a little softer. He thought about the months he had spent fighting the silence. The weeks of sitting at his desk and demanding, internally, that the words come back, as if the silence were a disobedience, a failure, something to be corrected. He had been so angry at it. So frustrated by the absence of the thing he needed that he had forgotten to ask what the absence might be telling him. "Ma," he thought. The gap. The pause. The silence between the notes. "I think I've been frightened of it," he said aloud. "The not writing. I think I treated it like something was wrong with me, when maybe," he looked at the notebook, the 7 words on the page. "Maybe it was just the space the next thing needed." Hannah looked at him with something warm in her eyes. "A field does not fail when it lies fallow," she said. "It rests. And the resting is part of what it grows." The rain shifted again. It was doing this tonight, moving through different registers, different depths, as though it were a piece of music and they were somewhere in the middle of it, past the opening movement but not yet at the close. It fell now with a kind of fullness, a richness, every drop distinct and complete, the sound on the roof like something being quietly and continuously renewed. Callum was not sure how long he had been in the tea house. It didn't feel like a question that mattered. He had finished his tea. The bowl sat empty in front of him, still faintly warm, the residue of the matcha a thin green ring at its bottom. The wagashi dish was empty. The notebook was open, the pen resting in the spine of it, the 7 words on the page drying into permanence. He felt, he realized, very quiet. Not empty, that was the difference. The hollowness he had arrived with had not been filled, exactly, that was not quite how it worked, but it had been replaced with something else. A stillness. A readiness. A sense that the next thing, whatever it was, could come, and he would be capable of receiving it. He looked around the room one last time. The beams above, dark with age. The tatami, worn smooth and golden in the lantern light. The small iron kettle on its stand, still breathing its faint curl of steam into the air. The paper screens, warm and amber, the rain moving behind them like something alive and purposeful. He wanted to remember all of it. And then he thought, let go of that. Let go of the wanting to remember. Let it simply be what it was, right now, completely, without the grasping at it. Let the bowl be beautiful without knowing it is beautiful. Let the room be what it is. He breathed in. He breathed out. I should go, he said. And he meant it, which was different from wanting to go. Hannah nodded, as though this too was exactly as it should be. She rose and began, with the same unhurried grace with which she had done everything, to clear the table. Each bowl lifted with both hands. Each motion complete in itself. She moved through the small room the way water moves, without effort, without waste, without any part of it looking like work. Callum put on his jacket. He picked up the notebook and held it for a moment before sliding it back into his pocket. Its weight felt different now. Not heavier, but more present. As though the 7 words had given it back its gravity. He stood at the door. Hannah. She looked up from where she stood at the counter, a bowl in each hand, her face lit warmly by the nearest lantern. Thank you, he said. For all of it. The tea. The conversation. For, he stopped, not quite having the words, which struck him as appropriate. For opening when it rains. She smiled. Not the small, satisfied smile from earlier, something fuller, warmer, the smile of someone who has given something freely and is glad to see it received. Come back, she said. If it rains again. He pushed the door open. The air met him, cool and wet and full of the smell of the city after rain. He stood for a moment under the narrow overhang above the door and let his eyes adjust, let his senses readjust to the outdoors, to the wider world. The street was very quiet. The lanterns along it burned their amber in the rain, each one surrounded by a soft halo where the light met the moisture in the air. The stone underfoot shone darkly. The trees above dripped in long, irregular intervals, not the continuous sound of the rain on the tea house roof but something more scattered, more patient, the trees releasing what they had gathered at their own pace. He looked up. Somewhere above the clouds, invisible but there, as they always were, the stars were doing their ancient, indifferent work. And below them, the city of Kyoto lay quiet and old and very much itself, its temples and its gardens and its narrow streets and its tea houses all going on together in the deep of the summer night, as they had gone on for centuries, as they would go on long after all of them were gone. Mono no aware. Tenderness toward the world, because nothing in it stays. He took the notebook from his pocket. He stood under the overhang, in the light from the tea house, and he wrote. Not carefully, not with the effortful deliberateness of someone trying to write. Just, freely, Quickly, the way water moves, going where the gradient took it. The street. The lanterns. The rain on the stone garden. The kettle on its stand. Hannah's hands moving through the steam. The taste of tea that tasted like something true. The 7 words on the page and the feeling of writing them, small and tentative as a first green thing pushing up through winter ground. He wrote for several minutes. When he stopped, his hand was slightly damp from the rain that had drifted under the overhang, and the ink of the last few lines was faintly smeared. He looked at it. He didn't mind. It looked like something that had happened in the world, in actual weather, rather than at a desk under fluorescent light. It looked real. He closed the notebook. He put it in his pocket. He stepped out from under the overhang and into the rain. It fell on him softly. Not cold, not on a summer night, not in Kyoto, but cool enough to feel clean, to feel like something refreshing the surface of things. He didn't run. He didn't pull his jacket up over his head. He simply walked, at the pace of someone who has remembered that there is no particular hurry, through the wet and lantern-lit streets of Higashiyama. His footsteps were quiet on the stone. The city breathed around him. He passed the great Vermilion Gate, still standing in the rain as it had stood in the rain 1,000 times before, and he paused beneath it, as he had paused on the way out, but it was different now. He was different now. Not transformed, not in any dramatic sense. But quieter. More present. More willing to be exactly where he was, in the rain, at this hour, in this ancient city, with nothing more urgent than the walk back to his inn and the sleep that was already, gently, beginning to pull at him. He thought of Hannah. He thought of her moving through the small room, the bowls in her hands, the lantern light on her face. He thought of her husband who had loved the rain and would have liked tonight very much. He thought of her grandmother's grandmother who had known the tea house, what it must have been like then, in those streets, in that rain, the same lanterns perhaps or lanterns very like them, the same smell of tea and incense and old wood, the same sound of water in the garden. The tea house, continuing. The rain, returning. The city, holding all of it, all the cups of tea ever drunk within its walls, all the writers who had passed through its streets, all the quiet evenings and the small discoveries and the words written in notebooks in the rain, holding all of it gently, the way water holds a reflection. Lightly. Without grasping. Letting it be what it was and then letting it go. He reached the inn. He slid off his shoes in the entrance, leaving them neatly at the step. The wooden floors inside were warm underfoot. The corridor smelled of cedar and something faintly sweet, the same flowers, perhaps, that had been on the desk in his room when he arrived, petals just beginning to open. His room was exactly as he had left it. The low bed. The single lamp, burning softly. The window, rain-streaked, the street outside a gentle blur of amber and dark. The desk, bare except for his open laptop, dark, asleep, the cursor blinking its patient blink in the black screen, waiting. He sat on the edge of the bed. He took the notebook from his pocket one last time and set it on the pillow beside him. He did not open it. There would be time for that, tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days after that. There would be time to go back through what he had written and find what was useful and let go of the rest. There would be time for all of it. Tonight, there was only this. He lay back. The rain on the window was extraordinary, close now, intimate, each drop tracing its clear line down the glass and joining the river of drops below it, and the sound of it filled the room with the same patient rhythm it had kept all evening, the same rhythm it had been keeping long before he arrived and would keep long after he was asleep. Tap, said the rain. And tap. And tap. He turned his head and looked at the window. The light from the street made the raindrops on the glass glow faintly, each one a small amber bead, each one holding in its curve the distorted, miniature reflection of the street below, the lanterns, the wet stone, the dark shapes of the trees. 1,000 tiny lanterns. On the glass. Right there. He had almost missed them. He was glad he had looked. His eyes grew heavy. He let them. The sound of the rain was so steady now, so constant and complete, that it had become the sound of the room itself, the sound of the walls and the ceiling and the warm wooden floor and the bed that held him, all of it part of the same continuous, undemanding sound. Tap. He thought of the tea house. The door, closing softly behind him as he left. The amber glow of the paper screens, visible for a moment as he walked away, and then, as he turned the corner into the wider street, gone. Just a street. Just the rain. And tap. He thought of Hannah's voice. Mono no aware. Tenderness toward the world, because nothing in it stays. He let the words move through him slowly, like the tea had moved through him, not grasped at, not analyzed, just received. The rain. The lanterns. The kettle breathing its quiet breath. And tap. The notebook on the pillow beside him. 7 words, and then more words, and the ink smeared by rain at the end, real, in his, and enough. The gap that was not failure. The pause that the music needed. The field lying fallow, ready, full of everything it had not yet grown. And tap. His breathing had slowed to something long and deep and entirely his own, matching the rain without trying to, as the body matches things when it has finally let go of the effort of not sleeping. His hands lay open at his sides, not curled, not holding, just open. Just resting. The lamp cast its soft light on the ceiling. The rain cast its soft sound on everything. And somewhere in the old streets of Kyoto, in a narrow lane in Higashiyama that you might find if you were looking in the right direction, or might find if you were looking in no direction at all, a tea house door closed quietly in the dark. The lantern above it swayed once in the wet air. The paper screens went dark, one by one, amber to nothing. And the rain continued, as it always does, asking nothing, giving everything, falling on the temples and the gardens and the moss-covered stones and the old wooden rooftops of a city that has learned, over many centuries, how to hold the beautiful and the passing thing together in the same gentle hand. Tap, said the rain. And tap. And tap. Callum slept. And that is where we leave him, the notebook on the pillow, the rain on the glass, the tea house dark and quiet in the Kyoto night. Good night.